In Kansas, 72% of fourth graders can't read at grade level. But what if the problem isn't the kids? It's the system that taught them. I'm Jessica Glover, and this is My Child Can't Read, a Heartland Crisis, a documentary-style podcast about how thousands of smart, capable children are being left behind and what parents and teachers are doing about it. In this season, we trace the forgotten history of reading instruction, hear from families who were told to wait it out, and uncover how widely used methods fail to teach the most foundational skill in education. You'll meet teachers who were taught but not trained, and students who were mislabeled, misdiagnosed, and nearly gave up. But there's hope, and it's already happening in Kansas classrooms. This is a story about loss, about learning, and about what happens when people refuse to give up on kids who struggle to learn to read right now. What was school like for you as a struggling reader?
I didn't understand why reading was so hard for me, and I assumed it had to be something I was doing wrong. I wasn't trying to avoid learning. I just didn't feel like I belonged in the same space as everyone else in the class.
I thought that I was dumb. I couldn't do anything. I thought that I couldn't learn like other people. I felt sad that I couldn't do things that other people could do.
We don't know what to do with her. Like, she's just lazy. She just doesn't care. Yeah, I was called lazy many times. I was misunderstood. I remember when I was probably in high school, I got diagnosed a second time, and I remember seeing this sheet that my mom had taken to my diagnosis. And it was a paper of me writing. When I was a child, it was a paper I wrote. And I just remember crying when I read that because it was the scariest thing to see, wow, I truly had no clue what I was doing. I couldn't write a basic sentence that made any sense. So I remember seeing that and wondering how my teachers didn't necessarily notice when I was in elementary school. I loved a lot of my teachers, but some of them I loathe them. Now when I think about what I went through, it makes me mad. That's what I've got to use my voice for, because something has to change.
Peer torture, I would hate school. The only thing I liked was recess. I only had one friend. No one else liked me. Most teachers did not like me. They just did not want to talk to me, so I just kind of adapted to that. People did not like me. Also, most teachers didn't like me because they would ignore me. That was the stupid one. Oh, the teachers would just ignore me or pretend I wasn't there. I think I was actually well behaved. I was really kind. I was super nice. I was really a really good student. I just didn't think they liked me for some reason.
At the beginning of the year, and I was excited to learn, and everybody had told me that I was going to succeed, and I had all of these big expectations for myself, and then I got there and I just felt defeated. You know what I mean? I was just sad. I was down on myself. I didn't think a lot of myself. I thought that I couldn't do anything. I felt stupid. And just generally, it was a bad experience.
What if the child getting in trouble at school wasn't defiant, but desperate? What if your bright, funny, creative kid suddenly started acting out, shutting down, or saying things like, "I'm dumb, I hate school," or even worse, "I don't want to be here anymore"? I'm Jessica Glover, and this is My Child Can't Read, a Heartland Crisis. In this episode, we're telling the story so many families are living, and too many schools are still missing. The truth about reading failure, and what it really looks like from the inside, kind of like the real student testimonials you just heard. What we miss. Parents start to notice it early. Maybe their child isn't picking up letters like the others. Maybe they can't remember sight words. Or maybe, like mom of 3, Stacie Swanson, told me, it starts with a gut feeling.
Hi, my name is Stacie Swanson. I'm a mom to 3 dyslexic kids. I have advocated for each one, especially for my oldest, Hadlie, which led us to move to Wichita to join the Phillips Fundamental Learning Center family. This strategic move has changed our lives. I am now one of the assessment specialists here at PFLC. I have received explicit reading instruction on how to work with children with dyslexia. She was a late talker. We had tons of ear infections, the tubes, all of that. Then we went into preschool and that alphabet, recognizing, saying the alphabet, the sounds, all of that was difficult for her. Rhyming was difficult. And then I just remember in kindergarten, she had brought home a reader, and it was very basic, with sight words. And she was reading one sentence, and it had is in it every single time, which is a sight word that all kindergartners know. Mm-hmm. And she would see it, and she wouldn't know what that word was. So we would try to sound it out, which at that time I didn't understand how that worked, because I kept thinking, well, how does that S making that Z sound? Mm-hmm. It wasn't until later that I figured out that was a voiced S from learning how to teach a child with dyslexia and all that. But she kept getting caught up on the word is. Okay. Every sentence, she could not figure out what that word was. And then we would go to the next sentence, and it would be is again, and she couldn't figure it out. And I'm like, at some point, she has to be able to recognize this word. Like, what is going on? I faced a lot of pushback, a lot of she'll outgrow it, she'll figure it out, just wait. Just that normal, usual response that a lot of parents are receiving. And, I listened to them a lot out of desperation of thinking it might happen, but I should have listened to my mom gut because I knew she wasn't going to outgrow it. It was just so in your face, like, this is not normal for a child to be facing these types of things of, not recognizing sight words or flipping those letters. Still in 3rd grade, all those things are not normal and should be addressed early on. I think a lot of these teachers don't know what's going on. Yeah. Because I know that Hadlie's teachers truly, genuinely loved and cared about her and wanted the best for her, but they didn't have the training. And for Hadlie, she's so profound that they didn't even know what to do at that point. It was just so she's a very bright and smart girl, but she can't do any of this stuff. And they just didn't even know what to do. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a lack of training and knowledge in that for sure. Mm-hmm. And then you have those, stereotypical things of reading backwards or the letters are moving or, stuff like that, which she wasn't experiencing because that's not dyslexia. And that's what they had heard.
Now let's hear what Sarah Collins, mom of Austin, heard reading in episode 1, has to say about her experience observing her son.
It was probably when he was in kindergarten, and he had, I have to say, a wonderful, loving teacher who communicated with me often, told me so much about his behaviors in the classroom, what he was doing, what he was not doing, how he wasn't keeping up with his peers. And I started to realize that this isn't my kid. This is not the kid that I had known his whole life, who was bright and curious and confident. He had started out just getting a little more shy at school. Then it became more, angry, acting out. I would hear a lot of negative things from him about other kids, about how he couldn't handle other kids' voices and that they just made him angry. And he had never been a particularly angry child. And so we started hearing more and more of those things from the school. And they told us, he'll adjust, we'll figure it out. Don't worry about the academic piece, he'll catch up. But the behaviors just kept escalating for him. Wow. And it was heartbreaking because eventually he was hiding under the lunch table. Last straw was finally he pushed this little girl down, and he's a big kid, right? Mm-hmm. And it broke my heart to see this kindergarten boy have to be in in-school suspension for a day. And I was like, this is not who this child is in his heart. Something is going on, but we didn't know. And his wonderful, loving teacher, who was doing everything she knew how to do, was just as clueless as we were. She didn't know. And they tried all of the traditional, we're going to give him a stoplight chart. And every day you get green, you get to get a prize. The child got one prize the entire school year.
Oh,
he worked so hard. And I mean, I set up a chart at home. Okay, every day that you get a green light, or every day that we don't have a problem at home, you get a check mark and you can earn a Lego set. I am offering him this thing that he loves. Legos were his favorite. But I was, in retrospect, asking him to do something he could not do. And the more that I learned, the more I realized I failed him as a parent. I know now that's not true, but I really felt that way. And he thought he was failing me because every day he didn't come home with green stoplight chart, that he failed me. The one thing that I will never forget, and this is how important it was to him to make me happy, is when he finally, after 9 months of trying to get the stoplight chart, he got to get a prize. He got something out of the prize box for me. It was like a hair clip and a ring. And I was like, you earned this, but yet you did this for me. Like, that's how brokenhearted he was, because he felt like he was letting me down. He felt like he was letting his teachers down. So, you know, here we are with a 6-year-old, you know, when you say, when did you first realize it? He was still a baby pretty much, and just feeling so defeated and so frustrated.
Mom and now private school teacher Lindsey Angleton discovered 2 of her children were struggling with reading due to some alarming signals. They too were misunderstood in their Kansas classrooms. And just like Janine Phillips did for her son Cooper, Lindsey sought second opinions from multiple medical professionals as her children's #1 advocate. I'm doing a teacher and parent interview today with Lindsey Angleton. Lindsey, could you share with me kind of the process that you went through on, like, one of our kids has said, the mother's gut? Like, mom just knew there was something that was a little off with my kiddos. And when did you recognize that with both of your kids?
Well, Ensley was falling asleep constantly at school.
Oh my goodness.
We went to multiple doctors and they diagnosed her with narcolepsy.
Okay.
And I was like, that just doesn't seem right. And when she got into a school with the correct teaching and that worked for her brain, she no longer had those problems where she wasn't falling asleep constantly during class. I think she was just overcompensating, trying to perfect everything and trying to just, trying to learn like everybody else, but just couldn't. She was exhausting herself so much that she would fall asleep constantly.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Wow. Okay. And then for your son, how did you recognize that he needed something different?
He was very different, but he was showing some of the same signs, not necessarily, it was more like an ADHD kind of thing, but just not able to write or comprehend or even just process things. He was processing things differently.
That's how it often begins, a waiting game. But while schools wait, children suffer, and the signs keep coming. Tantrums before school, stomach aches, avoiding reading aloud, starting to say they're stupid, being labeled as inattentive, or even defiant. Too often, those signs are misunderstood.
I am Dr. Janelle Tiedemann. I have a doctorate in psychology and a postdoctorate specialization in clinical neuropsychology. I'm also licensed as a clinical psychotherapist and school psychologist.
From your perspective as a psychologist, what should parents and teachers watch for that might indicate a deeper learning difference is at play?
One of the first signs that you can look for is limited vocabulary by the age of 2. Most children, typical children, can have a vocabulary word of 50 to 100 words. So that's always kind of something to be on the lookout for.
Wow.
They should be talking fairly well at the age of 2. Any kind of speech delay can be a concern. Difficulty completing nursing rhymes. Children by the age of 3 should be able to do that. They enjoy usually singing those with you. So if that is not occurring, that could be a red flag or a sign. Of course, difficulty with phonemic awareness. Kids should be able to hear and manipulate sounds and words. Typically, it's developed between the ages of 3 to 5. So you should be seeing that happen. Inability to identify rhyming words such as cat, bat, and hat. difficulty recognizing letters. By age 5, children should be able to recognize some letters. Remembering sight words like high-frequency words like when, who, ask, are. Difficulty holding a pencil and forming letters. Typical children develop fine motor skills early, and children with dyslexia struggle with fine motor skills, so you want to be watching for that. Spelling difficulties, of course, if they're consistently misspelling familiar words or spelling them phonetically. So a lot of times children will spell the word comb like home, and so it's C-O-M-E instead of C-O-M-B. So things like that are typically signs. Sometimes they will have difficulty getting to the point of what they're trying to say, and they'll use a whole lot of words to kind of figure that out, but it's not coming out the way they want it to. Passive participation in class activities, slow and hesitant to begin tasks, or taking a long time to complete tasks. Difficulty finishing an exam in the time that's allowed. Consistently achieving poor results in examinations. Difficulty tying shoes. Difficulty with left and right. Again, working pace is slower, specifically if they're writing notes or any kind of writing where they have to do that at a certain pace. Oral reading, if you have the child read out loud and you are noticing that they hesitate on words, skip words, insert words that aren't there, add endings to words, or take endings off of words, all of those can be signs that something else is going on.
That is a really long list.
I know.
So, of these red flags, the indicators, right?
Yes.
What are the most commonly missed or misunderstood, especially in our bright, creative kids?
Well, here's the thing about the bright, creative kids.
Okay.
They have very, very good visual spatial skills.
Yes.
Okay. And a lot of them have even further than that, but complex problem-solving skills. Some of them fall in the gifted range in those areas.
Okay.
So what happens is teachers see that, notice that, or even an IQ test is done and they see that. And so they strictly are looking at their intelligence and saying, well, there's no way they could have a reading disability because they are so gifted in these areas. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's the thing. It's often missed because of that.
Okay.
The other thing is these kids are very good, usually conversationalists, storytellers. They're creative. They're imaginative. Mm-hmm. They do all these things. They're abstract thinkers. They think outside the box. Yeah. And so all of that, the teachers say, he's great.
Yeah.
She's great.
Yeah.
And so those things take precedence over looking at the finer details of their work.
Okay.
And where they're missing spelling words, or they're reading the words wrong, or they're, taking a long time to read or to write or to complete examinations in the allotted amount of time. They're the last ones to finish an assignment. All of those things kind of are missed because they keep saying they're so bright, they're, they have it together, they can solve these problems.
Yeah.
So
wow.
That's what happens. So again, I talked about some of the hallmarks of dyslexia and how they're overlooked because of their brightness and in most cases, giftedness and visual, spatial, and complex problem solving. But some other things are they will have difficulty remembering, their concentration is not as good, difficulty following instructions, managing time, performing slowly in tasks, difficulty multitasking, and also they have poor auditory working memory, which would relate to an inability to not remember things or even not following directions. And that auditory working memory also is what creates their inability to sound out words really well and hold that information in their brain.
That's what happened to Cooper Phillips. You met him in episode 2. His mom, Janine Phillips, the founder of Phillips Fundamental Learning Center, comments on the behaviors she observed years ago as a teacher mom, trying to figure out what her misunderstood learner needed.
As I watched him, knowing what I knew about child development, what I can tell you is the emotional toll was horrific, and I couldn't find anyone who could help me help him. My medical journey began when he was kicked out of his third preschool. with the remark, he's just not mature enough to be in preschool. He can't follow directions. He refuses to do many of the tasks. And as a teacher, I don't know what to do with him.
Observing Cooper's behavior challenges in the early 90s, Janine Phillips searched out 14 different medical professionals to help her figure out how to help Cooper, and that's when she discovered Dr. Brian Stone, heard earlier in episode 2. While interviewing Dr. Brian Stone, I learned that tragically diagnosed dyslexic students often dismiss their remarkable abilities. They assume everyone can do what comes naturally to them, like exceptional spatial reasoning, building complex structures, or mechanical skills. This leads to a devastating disconnect where they excel at complex tasks, but maintain poor self-concepts, thinking, I'm not very bright, even while demonstrating extraordinary capabilities. The combination of academic struggles in school-valued areas, persistent processing challenges, and damaged self-esteem creates a particularly challenging experience for dyslexic students who are often highly gifted in non-academic domains.
So emotionally, the child is feeling like a failure.
Yeah.
Most of the time they feel like they're dumb or stupid, that everyone else is better than they are. They have low self-esteem. They feel discouraged. They feel like they are so much slower than their peers and that they just are kind of on an island by themselves and they feel left out. Neurologically, the difference in the brain structure is that children with dyslexia, or people with dyslexia, tend to have smaller and less organized left temporal parietal regions, which are responsible for language processing. And the left hemisphere, specifically the posterior reading network, shows less activation during reading tasks in individuals with dyslexia compared to typical readers. There's also a difference in the white matter tracts that connects the various brain regions involved in language processing. And dyslexia that is strongly associated with difficulties in phonological processing, which involves recognizing and manipulating the sounds of language. This deficit also affects their ability to decode words more accurately and fluently. Working memory and attention in children with dyslexia, people with dyslexia, makes it harder for them to sustain their focus and retain attention and information. And then some researchers believe that dyslexia may also involve difficulties with visual processing, such as perceiving and discriminating between letters and words. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what's going on. The earlier we identify it, the earlier the appropriate research-based reading practices, multisensory, can be implemented to help lessen the burden of reading. We can also help the child receive accommodations that will improve classroom performance and improve self-esteem. If we don't, the child suffers. I have evaluated hundreds, if not thousands, of students suffering from dyslexia who could have had help back in the early years before they became distraught and felt hopeless, before they felt like failures and had developed low self-esteem, and before they were significantly behind grade level due to lack of intervention and the right kind of intervention. I had a 54-year-old woman come to me about a year ago wanting to be evaluated for dyslexia. She told me that she had always struggled in school with reading and spelling comprehension, and she knew that something was terribly wrong. However, 45 years ago, she was overlooked due to lack of awareness, oversight, or a combination. When I was reviewing results and pointing her strengths, very bright, high visual spatial and complex problem solving, and her weaknesses, fluency, spelling, language simple processing, she began to break down. She told me that she was so relieved to find out what she knew was a problem for her. She was so relieved to find out that she was not dumb and not a failure. She said, I wish I would have known this information years ago. It would have saved me a lot of heartache.
Dr. Tiedemann says the first signs of dyslexia are often behaviors, frustration, shutdowns, outbursts, not because kids don't care, but because their brains work differently, and the world doesn't see it yet. For parents, it's exhausting. You try everything, like Janine Phillips in episode 2, who was so desperate she'd try anything. The toll was heavy. Blame, shame, disappointment, guilt. Teachers feel it too. No one wants to watch a child slip further behind. Parents want to trust the school so badly. But after months or years of hearing, just wait, he'll grow out of it, They've seen no improvement. She isn't getting any better. And when parents push for more help, it can feel like a standoff. Parents talk about dagger eyes across the table. Teachers feel their professionalism is questioned. Everyone knows what's happening isn't working. But what now? Misdiagnosed, misunderstood, and not alone. It might feel personal, but this story is national. Reading struggles don't just affect a few kids, they affect millions. In 2024, only 30% of U.S. fourth graders scored proficient in reading on the nation's report card. That means 70% of kids are not reading at grade level. And the numbers are even worse for students with learning differences, students of color, and those in poverty. So, how did we get here? To understand that, we have to talk about the reading wars. For decades, American schools have swung between two poles: phonics, teaching kids how letters and sounds work together, and whole language, the idea that kids learn to read naturally by being surrounded by books. Balanced literacy was supposed to be the compromise, a blending phonics and whole language. But in many classrooms, phonics got left behind. Balanced literacy often includes some phonics instruction, but it's typically loose and not reliant on a structured scope and sequence. Classrooms that utilize balanced literacy often include whole class and small group experiences with text, including guided reading in small groups. And kids who didn't catch on, they were labeled or left behind entirely.
Every day that I left training that first summer, I said to how did I not know this? Why did people not teach me this? Why did my college not prepare me for this? I didn't know the 6 syllable types. I didn't know so much I didn't know. And every day I left just excited I was learning it, but very sad that I hadn't known it up until this point. And that was 20 years into my career. So I became a teacher of reading after I learned alphabetic phonics and learned about the science of reading and learned how the brain learns to read. Then I became a reading teacher. I advocate my heart is for kids who are neurodiverse, kids who are struggling, and what it looks like oftentimes in the classroom is this is the behavior issue. And if you really drill down, you see they can't read. Yeah. And that's how they're coping. Mm-hmm. So I have a huge heart for those kids, and every teacher that I encounter, I say to them, hey, this training changed my life. It not only changed my life, it changed the lives of every kid that came in my classroom. Yeah. And I really think here we are in the process of saving lives, because kids who can't read and get passed on and on and on without being able to read are not going to survive. And those are your dropouts, and those are the kids who often get in trouble. And I'm not bashing teachers by any stretch of the imagination, because I know teachers can't teach what they don't know. Right. And I was in their shoes for 20 years. I thought I was doing okay. And I was doing okay for the majority of the kids I was teaching, but for that 20%, I wasn't. And, I'll tell anybody that'll listen, you really need to get this training. It's life-changing. It'll make you a different teacher. It will make you say, how in the world did I not know this? So it's pretty exciting. And when teachers come here, you can just see the excitement about, oh my gosh, why didn't I know this? And it really changes the lives of those kids that walk through their classrooms.
My name is Sarah Balzer. I've been in education for 17 years, and I've had the opportunity to teach in a really wide range of settings. Public schools across Kansas, military schools, and high ESOL schools in California, and even an international school in China. I've taught 1st, 2nd, and 4th grades, served as a K-5 reading specialist, and worked as a district ESOL coordinator and district dyslexia specialist, supporting students from pre-K 3 through 12th grade. Now I run my own private practice where I offer reading therapy, stern math, and evaluations. and I'm exploring ways to support teachers through dyslexia training that goes beyond what programs like Letters provide. I'm really passionate about making sure educators are properly equipped, and just as passionate about walking alongside parents of neurodivergent kids, helping them feel seen, supported, and empowered with accurate information. It's hard work, but I believe we can change the system, and I'm here for that. At the time, I actually thought I was very well prepared. And to be honest, I always felt like a strong teacher, especially when it came to reading. My students usually made pretty solid progress in my classroom, but everything changed when I began my training in Take Flight at Fundamental Learning Center. That's when my eyes were really opened to just how much I did not know and how much I wasn't doing for my kids. Now I think back to certain students' faces I still remember, and I wish I could go back. I wish I could have helped them feel seen, supported, and truly understood in ways that I just wasn't equipped to do.
It's not that teachers didn't care, it's that they weren't trained. And without the right instruction for kids with dyslexia especially, failure seems inevitable.
Teachers are still today terribly depressed over this idea that they didn't know what they didn't know. And as I do teacher education, they will shout this out in class. I didn't know. How was I supposed to know this? And I get it. I didn't know either. Luckily for me, Cooper forced me to go down that path and figure out what I didn't know and what to do about it. So we say this all the time, that it's not teachers' fault.
What defiance really means. So, what happens when kids start to fall behind and no one understands why? Too often, it's chalked up to behavior.
He was acting out because he thought he was dumb, and no one bothered to tell him that he wasn't.
Undiagnosed dyslexia can look like ADHD, oppositional behavior, a learning delay, or even a mental health disorder. But reading failure isn't just an academic issue. It's a biological stressor. Dr. Jack Shonkoff, who is a pediatrician, one of the world's leading voices in early childhood brain science, and also leads the Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University, reminds us that young children experience their world as an environment of relationships. And those early relationships shape the architecture of the developing brain. When a child struggles with reading and feels misunderstood, it's not just an academic issue. It changes how their brain responds to the world. That stress, especially when met with blame or punishment instead of support, can trigger behaviors that look like defiance, but are really signs of hurt. As Shankoff's research shows, what we often label as misbehavior may be a child's way of saying, "I'm overwhelmed. I need help." From labels to liberation. And when the world keeps telling you you're the problem, you start to believe it. But for Cooper Phillips, the truth came just in time. At the early age of 6, he was diagnosed with severe dyslexia and taught by his mom, Janine Phillips, in a way that worked.
I'd be lying if I said I instantly fell in love with school and reading. Kids with dyslexia often have to put in twice the effort just to keep up, and it's really mentally exhausting. But something had changed. I wasn't getting sick at school anymore, and I no longer felt broken. Still, I was just a kid, and I remember being furious with my mom for making me stay inside and work while my classmates went out for recess. But with her constant support and encouragement, I kept going. It wasn't easy, but for the first time, I felt like progress was actually possible.
And just like educator mom Janine Phillips and her son Cooper Phillips, other teachers and students around Kansas have had their lives changed when they learn what they never knew: how to teach and learn, and to read in a systematic way, the code.
Once I saw what real reading instruction looked like, everything changed. My students changed. They weren't the problem. I just hadn't been given the knowledge and then the tools to teach them to read.
So what happens when struggling readers, especially dyslexic kids, get the teaching they need to be successful?
I used to cry every night after school. I'd throw my backpack down and say, I'm just dumb. I'll never get it. Now, I speak to future teachers and tell them, please learn this. And please see kids that are like me.
It was a night and day difference, I'm telling you. I went in to see Miss Connie the summer after kindergarten, and she diagnosed me with dyslexia. And at first I was nervous because I didn't want to be different, and I thought that I was going to be weird for having dyslexia, and I felt like that was a bad thing. But like the first week of school, I knew that I was in the right place and that I was getting the help I needed. The way that they teach it here, which is really a way that you should teach any kid how to read, is just the best way to do it, because it teaches it in a way that focuses on mastery rather than speed. So by learning each individual sound, you have a more complete understanding of the English language, and that can obviously be a very good thing for all kids, no matter if you're dyslexic or not. So yeah, that's really just the best way to teach it here. I think that it's made me see myself in a much better light, because I went from feeling defeated and unintelligent to feeling like I could do anything if I tried hard enough. Socially, I'm more confident too, because before then, I don't think people really wanted to talk to me or really understood me, because they thought I was quiet and I didn't want to do anything as far as education goes. And I think that kind of pushes people away from you in school. So, now I'm flourishing. I've got plenty of friends, and, it's great. That's one area where I think I've grown a lot, besides obviously reading and my education. I just wish that every teacher knew what dyslexia was and had kind of that deep understanding that educators here have about it, because I think that they could really teach kids better than they are right now. Even if they're in a public school and they don't necessarily have a program for dyslexia, I think it's just really important that all educators understand and know about dyslexia so that they can help each individual kid thrive.
And that's the power of being seen, of finally realizing it wasn't you, it was the system, and you can get help and make a change. You are not alone. To the parent whose child is acting out, to the teacher who feels like they're failing their students, to the student who's told themselves they'll never be smart, you are not alone. You are not to blame, and you are not out of options. There is a way forward, and it starts with recognition, with training, with seeing the whole child and not just the behavior.
At Phillips Fundamental Learning Center, we meet a lot of families who say, something just feels off, but I don't know what it is. So if you're wondering about your child's literacy development, you're not alone. Here are some signs that might point to early dyslexia or neurodivergence. Does your child mix up sounds like saying aminal for animal? Struggle with fine motor skills like using crayons or a fork? Confuse directions like up and down, left and right? Have trouble following multi-step instructions? Struggles with rhythm, skipping or reciting songs? Gets frequent ear infections? Writes their name but can't identify the letters? Well, if 6 or more of these sound familiar, your child may be at risk for dyslexia, and that's exactly why we're here. I'm one of the assessors at Phillips, and when you come in, you'll be met with care, not judgment. We'll guide you through a gentle, developmentally appropriate assessment, and together, we'll uncover what's really going on. After the assessment, we create a personalized path forward, tailored to your child's unique needs. That may include free trainings just for parents, a look at our specialized school, a list of trusted, trained literacy specialists, or even professional development for your child's current teacher. But you shouldn't have to figure this out alone. Let's take the next step together. Call 316-684-7323 or visit funlearn.org today to schedule your child's assessment. We're here when you're ready.
If you recognize your own child in this episode, take heart. They are not the problem. Trust your instincts, speak up, and advocate for an accurate evaluation. Every child deserves to be truly seen and given the tools that work. Reach out to a trusted teacher, school leader, or local advocate. Help is out there, and you're not alone. Next time on My Child Can't Read, it's our Season 1 finale. We step back to look at the bigger picture and forward to ask the most important question of all. What if we got this right? We take you inside a Kansas school where reading failure was no longer accepted as fate and transformation began. You'll hear from teachers who were once part of the problem and what happened when they were finally given the tools to become the solution. Because literacy isn't a mystery, it's a choice. Kansas is at the crossroads, and the future of reading for every child depends on the road we take next. Thanks for listening to My Child Can't Read, a Heartland Crisis. If today's episode resonated with you, if you saw yourself, your child, or your classroom in these stories, you're not alone. We believe every child can learn to read, and every parent and teacher deserves the knowledge to help them. I invite you to take action today by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss an episode, rate and review to help others find this series, and tell us about your story and discover how the Phillips Fundamental Learning Center is changing lives through literacy at funlearn.org/podcast. That's funlearn.org/podcast. And share this show with a friend, teacher, or fellow parent who needs to hear it. All resources, source credits, and tools mentioned in this episode can be found in the show notes. Remember, together we can rewrite the story one reader at a time right here in the Heartland.